Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today we are filling our creative health buckets. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today we have an interview that it's really relevant to right now, and honestly I can't wait to share it with you, so we're going to get into that. But first, I want to give a quick listener shout out to David Inlow. Now, David left the podcast a 5-star iTunes review, and he said, "I started the podcast as somebody who has shot personal photos and enjoyed photography for a long time. The content of the podcast is honest, poignant, and inspiring. To the potential listener, do not miss out on a wonderful opportunity and just start listening." David, I am sure that you are out, flying a plane over some beautiful mountain right now or something. So I'll keep this short and let you get back to paying attention to, flying, essentially. I'm really glad that you are enjoying the podcast, even though you've been shooting for a long time. Still find it inspiring. That is so cool. That's kind of what this is all about. So, David, I really appreciate you and you taking the time to leave the show an iTunes review. And guess what? The show is at 145 iTunes reviews. This is crazy. This is a little challenge. I wonder if we can get to 150 reviews by next week. You have the power. You guys can do this. We can make this happen. If you've ever got anything out of listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast, I would be just elated and full of joy if you could leave the show an honest review. If you are in the Apple Podcast player, you can just click on the title of this episode, scroll down to the review section, and leave a review. If you're in Spotify or Google Podcasts, there's no review section, unfortunately. But if you wanted to, you could send me an email and let me know that you are enjoying the podcast. I would be thrilled. That is beginnerphotographypodcast@gmail.com. Also, as I mentioned last week, I am hosting a free webinar June 10th, where I share the 3 secrets to capturing better moments with the gear that you already have. It's going to be a ton of fun. I'm going to share some of my real-world examples, so show a bunch of photos, and I would love to have you there. You can register to save your spot by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com, and then there is just a banner at the top of the page. If you can't make it live, no worries. Still go ahead and register, and I will send you the replay. Now again, save your spot by clicking the banner at the top of beginnerphotographypodcast.com and register for this free training, the 3 secrets to capturing better moments with the camera gear that you already have now. So let's go ahead and talk about this week's episode before we get into it. This podcast is all about, as you can see by the title, it's all about your creative health, which it honestly came from a place of being overworked or trying to do just all the things. But with the way that 2020 has been going for everybody, this interview is really relatable for the stress that we all feel from that too. So I hope that you really like this interview and feel a bit of a reset after my chat today with Southern Louisiana lifestyle photographer TahJah Harmony. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited that you're here today. You are one of these people who I found, it's actually a really crazy story how I found you. I was looking for tools to help better with photography workflows, and you left a comment on somebody's blog, and it was very upbeat, it was very happy, it was very excited, and I thought, wow, this person is really obviously appreciative of what's going on. So I clicked on the link, and it showed your name, and then, wow, this sounds really bad. And then I Googled your name, and then there you were. You popped up. There was your website. There was your podcast as well. And just digging in, I could tell that you are a force of somebody who wants to do good things in the world, who is really excited about what it is that you do, that you have a lot of passion. And sometimes I feel like that's lacking from a lot of other photographers, just in our industry, I suppose. So, wow, that was a really long introduction. I apologize for that, but overall, what I'm trying to say is, TahJah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. That's so crazy. I always love to see like how people end up finding each other because it's always a crazy story like that. So I love it.
It is, and I feel like that happened more, oddly enough, when we spent more time just like talking to friends and family, and who do you know, and building those relationships. But now that it's all on the internet, I feel like there's less of that. So whenever you can find that little piece of gold, I suppose, it's always very fun. So yeah, I'm excited to have you on today. We're talking about creative health. We're talking about feeling better as artists. But before we get into any of that, can you share how you got started in photography in the first place?
Yes, so I have always gone to performing like art schools, and so I started learning how to be in the dark room and developing photos when I was actually 8. They just had, it was a class that I could take when I was in school, and it was just something that I kind of like carried with me. I was always like a socially awkward child and things like that, and so when I would go to like parties or any kind of social events, I just had my camera with me because it gave me a job, and I was like, I'll just walk
Yes.
around and take pictures and I don't have to talk to people. um, and so I ended up going to college for art, but I ended up just really gravitating towards photography. When I graduated, I got a degree in actually like I was an app developer, so I was really into like game design and animation. And so I did that for a little while. When I graduated college, I got a job for the state as an app developer, and I just always did photography on the side. And it got to the point where it was like I had to choose, like, do I want to continue doing like the tech stuff or do I want to do more photography? And so I was like, I'm young, I'm just going to take the leap and do photography full time, and that has been what I've been doing for the past 8 years.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of questions right there. First of all, I love that story. I can relate so much. I was totally that socially awkward kid who brought that camera with me everywhere. It's easy because it's like suddenly you have a screen that you can like protect yourself, or that you can stand behind. So I totally get that. So first question is, this darkroom experience that you had at 8 years old. This was an option from your school.
Yes.
So like chemicals and developer and bleach, you were just given to 8-year-olds, and you were able to develop your own photos.
Yes, it was very like it was definitely very supervised, like very like kid friendly and things like that. But yeah, it was just like would take our black and white film with the 35 millimeter, and then we would like go into the dark room, and they would kind of like let us like photograph it with the enlarger. And the teacher mostly did like the developing part of it. But yeah, that was like, which is crazy to think this is what happens when you like went to school in the early 90s. It was okay.
Yeah, I know. I feel that. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. That's awesome. That's a very cool story. I wish that I had a similar experience like that. We were just I was in yearbook when I was in middle school, and I remember our school for some reason got a grant to get like a digital camera. And it's funny. It's actually, let me grab it right here. This isn't the camera, but this is the same style camera. But it's like the Sony
I
has a
had
floppy
that
disk.
camera.
Seriously?
Yes.
This is what like started it all for me, and I was very excited about digital photography. I thought, oh cool, like we're done with film, even though like I was in middle school. I had no idea what I was talking about. But sometimes I feel like this held me back a little bit from learning and growing as a photographer, because I never had that darkroom experience growing up. I never had like a photography class in school. I had yearbook, but it was just digital photography. It wasn't until pretty recently, actually, that I started to get into developing my own film. Sorry, I'm totally going off on a tangent there. Let's get back to you. You were really into photography. You decided to tell me about this difference between coding, app developing, and then also going to an art college. How did that work? How did that work out?
So when I started college, this is like, there's so many tangents to the story. I have the most complicated college story, but I
These are
started
the
off
best.
as a music major. And when I was going to school for that, I kind of was just like, oh, I'm don't want to do this anymore. Like I just wanted to change, and I wanted to do art. Never taken an art class in my life besides like doing photography. But it was like I just wanted to change my major to art, and the art school would not accept me. They were just like, the dean of the art college was just like, you don't have a portfolio, you've never taken art in high school, like you cannot be. So I showed up every day for a week until they allowed me into the program.
Whoa.
And so once I was done and actually got into the school, I was terrible at art. Like I was so bad. I couldn't even draw a cube. Like I was trying to like draw a cube and I didn't know how to because I've just never experienced it. But I loved how challenging it was. And my teachers were always like, you need to change your major. Like you are not an artist. Like you need to leave.
Jeez.
And that was also how I ended up taking a photography class, because I was like, I do know how to do this. Like I was like, I know how to take photos. And I was more interested in like what the computers could do with art. Like I loved Photoshop when I was younger, and I didn't even know that you could major in Photoshop, which was probably why the dean wouldn't let me in, because I was like, I want to major in Photoshop. And he's like, that is not a thing. Like you can't be in here. And so I loved how you could use the computers to express yourself and do things with art, because I was actually really terrible at doing it by hand. And when I was going to school, I just remembered how much I loved I really enjoyed my computer science classes in high school. And when I was doing more and more of like the computer science part of it, I just was like, oh, you can actually mix these two things together. And that's kind of how I got really interested in like video game design and animation, because I just loved how you can express things and like in the movement that you could do. And so I actually was one of the very first artists at LSU to take computer science classes. And I was the very first person to double major in art and computer science, that they
Wow.
actually ended up creating a minor so that people could do art and computer science, and at LSU at least, because other schools were more like Hal Arts and other schools were more accepting of there being this tech side to art, while this college I was in, it was all like studio, museum, art collecting, like that type of art.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Wow, that's very cool. That's very cool that that you found a way to blend those two things together, and that they allowed you essentially to do that, and that you found this path for yourself. And but I'm interested. I want to know a little bit more about kind of the photography side of things right now, which is when you were 8, right? When you're shooting with you're shooting 35 mil. Were you shooting? Was it auto? Were you already shooting manual? Where I'm trying to get at here is what was the hardest part about photography for you to learn when you were just getting started?
When I was just getting started, I think the hardest part of photography for me to learn, I think it was mostly figuring out what I wanted to shoot. I had a really hard time. I think even all the way until college, and I think I still struggle with that now. Is that when I first held a camera, and I remember like taking a photo and holding a print in my hand, I was just kind of like, I can show people how I see the world. Like I was like, and it was just this very like very impactful and strong thing at the age of 8, that I was just like, I can finally show people the way that I see the world, because I just felt like the way that I saw things was very different than everyone else, like how I process things, and I was super imaginative and things like that. And so I just always had a very hard time of just like putting this pressure on photography to be able to like explain how I see the world, or like give power to like my voice. Like I was like, I always wanted something to express without having the words to it, because I always felt like I didn't have the words, but I could visually represent things. And I think that it's still, even at from that young age into even being an adult, like I'm just like, I just feel like this pressure of being able to like tell these very strong stories through my photography.
I feel like you crawled into my brain and you said exactly my story as well. That's incredible. Um, yeah. So how old were you? Would you say? Obviously, you enjoyed photography for a while. So at what point did you decide, you know what? I love photography. I want to make this a big part of my life.
It definitely wasn't until college, because it was just kind of something that I did. I didn't even necessarily think that it was a talent or a skill, because it was just something that I've just always just kind of done. It was always kind of like my safety thing. It was like how I just enjoyed doing it. And when I started college, because I had such a hectic schedule, I couldn't work. And so I kind of was like, that's when I learned about wedding photography and working on the weekends. So I started my photography business when I was in college, and I just kind of would photograph things on the weekends and like get paid so I could spend all this money on art supplies because art school is so expensive. And that was kind of like the beginning of the journey with it. And it really wasn't until I like truly graduated and I had the full-time job, because it was like that's like what you're taught to have the 9 to 5, to have the full-time job and to and all of those things. And so it was like when I had that, I realized like, wait, like photography is actually a job. Like people were actually paying me to do this, and it was so fulfilling hearing people say like how impactful their photos meant to them, and how, especially things where it's like you, when you're doing things for so long, hearing people say like my the photo that you took of my mom out on our wedding day was actually the photo that we used for her obituary. And it's just like things when you're like, wow, like I wasn't even thinking of, I was just thinking about photographing your wedding. I wasn't thinking about like capturing those people and those things. And like just hearing those stories just really like inspired me into like really becoming passionate in telling stories through photography.
Wow, yeah, that's a powerful moment, isn't it? Jeez.
Yeah.
I know that as new photographers oftentimes feel that the photography itself is what can fulfill us creatively, right? It's a new skill. Maybe, you're working that 9 to 5. Here we have this new thing. It's photography. It's very fun. It's creative. From a creative health standpoint, when did you first feel burnout from your photography? Sorry, this is a kind of a roundabout question. Uh, Tell me about when you first felt that burnout as having photography as a creative outlet, and then feeling the burnout from that. Do you remember when that was, and can you tell me what that felt like?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it was when you first start your business. And this is also the mindset that you need to have when you first start your business. Everything is hustle, hustle, hustle. It's this constant drive of like being motivated, of like, you have the girls with the Beyonce cups that's like, I have the same amount of hours in a day as Beyonce. And
Yeah.
so like I can be as successful, and everything is like, is hustle, stay humble, hustle hard. And it's just like this constant, like I just always felt like I had to go, 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 and just run as fast as I could. It was like as soon as I was done with my 9 to 5 job, I was coming home and I was editing, I was responding to emails, I was working on my website, I was building this business. But then once it was built, I still had that hustle mentality where I was just like chasing after every dollar, getting all the clients, constantly being on social media. And I just realized after like that 5 year mark of doing that, that I was like, I am tired. I cannot hustle anymore. And it was like, especially when I would even get a new inquiry, or even getting, which is going to sound so terrible, I hate admitting this, when a client would send me the sweetest email about how much they loved their photos, and it's just like, didn't even spark anything in me. It was
Mm,
just kind of like, okay, on to the next thing, because I'm hustling and I'm running, and I just have to get, now I have to get the new thing. It was like I never took that, I
wow.
could never have that moment of gratitude. I was just so driven. And I just got to the point where I was exhausted. Like I was like, I can't respond to I don't even want to open my emails. I don't want to open my camera. It's like if I had to do another shoots like all weekend long, it was just it was too much. And then that's really when I realized like, this is what burnout feels like, when the thing that was my creative outlet, the thing that sparked me and gave me so much joy, is not fulfilling that. It's just draining so much out of me, was really when I realized like, okay, this is what burnout is.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I can relate to that as well. That's a tough feeling. So how do we, how do you define creative health?
I love that. So creative health is Definitely something that was having coffee with one of my friends, and she was talking about like her physical, her mental, and her spiritual health. And she was like, I feel like all of these things are being fulfilled. I'm like, I'm working out, I'm eating well, I am like enjoying my family, I feel very spiritual and connected with the world. She's like, but I still just always feel so burned out that it's not connecting to my work, because she was a jewelry maker, and so she just felt like very uninspired to create things, even though everything in her life was going very well. And I felt the same. And I was telling her how I felt the same way. And I was like, what if as creatives, we had like this creative health bucket that needed to be fulfilled, just like our mental, spiritual, and physical health? Because a lot of times we read things about like self-help where it's like,
Hmm.
turn your mind off, turn off your computer, enjoy the time with your family, take a bubble bath, like all of those things. But unfortunately, as creatives, like what we do is so conceptual that our minds go everywhere with us. So it's like even when I'm watching a movie, I'm like analyzing the light and looking at it, thinking about emails. When I'm on vacation, I'm constantly just like, oh, if I could just check my emails, I would feel so much better. Like it's like I needed like a hard reset, because our minds are so used to always going. And so
Yes.
it was kind of like understanding like maybe like there's this aspect of what we do where we actually need to figure out how to creatively fulfill this self-help that we would need. And so that was kind of the beginning of the Creative Health Podcast.
So tell me more about that. Like, what did you discover in that time? How did you start to grow and start to fulfill your creative health bucket?
Great. So I think that this looks different for everyone, and it's really about like auditing and analyzing everything that you do. So one of the very first things that I usually will tell people to do is take note cards, like individual note cards, and write down everything that you do for your business. So it can be something, anything where it's like we respond to emails, we do taxes, um, we do wedding photography, or maybe you edit this. And that's just like writing down all the things that you do so that you can actually visually see how exhausted you are, because you'll have like a stack of note cards individually where you're just like, one person cannot do all of these things. As much as it's like we love to be that person that can do, but you can't do all of those things very well. And so what I do is I kind of go and do this like Marie Kondo, like, the kind of method where it's like looking at every individual note card and just be like, do I like doing this part of my job? Like, does this spark joy, or could I hand this off to someone else? And so that kind of also begins that journey of you understanding like, I don't like, I don't like responding to emails and doing client work or any of that client back and forth. And scheduling is very draining for me. I might need to hire a virtual assistant. So it's like, or if you're just like, I love taking photos, but I don't love editing them, I might need to hire an editor. So it's mostly just kind of going from like a very like logical standpoint, of a backbone standpoint, of just going through everything that you do and figuring out like ways that you can like pass that on to other people, so you can do like focus on the thing that makes you very passionate, which is probably like the creativity and the actual work, and it takes that brain space away. Also like finding a new passion, which is very hard, especially in this day and age, because usually when we find a passion, we try to make it a business. So it's like if you start like, it's just like what we do. So it's like even if you start like, I love doing calligraphy and I love writing and doing these watercolor works, and then you start posting them on Instagram, and then you're like, I can sell these, I'm gonna make that into a business. And so we are constantly figuring out how to do things like that. So finding something that actually restores you creatively, that isn't necessarily a side hustle. Like, don't try to create another side hustle. Mine has been cooking, and also like, so baking is very important to me, and then rock climbing. Having those creative outlets to have something like physical taken out of me also like brings back a new fresh set of eyes like to my work. When I started like being around different people and with rock climbing, like that just kind of really inspired me. And as well as doing things like baking, like just little things like that can actually like re-inspire and fill you up when you go back to your client work.
Yeah, tell me more about that. How has cooking and rock climbing, in your words, you think made you a better wedding photographer?
You are listening to the free version of the Beginner Photography Podcast, where each week you learn how world-class photographers see and capture the world around them. If you want to hear the extended interview with their best business tips to learn how to make money with your camera, then become a premium member today by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button to join now.
Oh my gosh, that was a pretty clear definition of when something should be a business and when it shouldn't be a business. That's a very analytical look at things, and I appreciate that, because in this artistic world that we live in, a lot of times there's this gray area of what, of when you can make money and when is it okay and when you should keep things artistic. So I appreciate you sharing that and how to be a happier business owner. That's
Yes.
that's what it was. That was great. Let's go back to art college for a moment.
Yes.
I'm thinking about this because art college is this place where I went to a film school, so I don't know if it's not exactly like an art college. We didn't draw anything, but the idea of creativity was kind of fostered and it was kind of promoted to grow within us. And I'm thinking about back at that time, I didn't feel any sort of creative burnout, really. Was there anything for you that you saw? Maybe there was a spark of where burnout could come from?
That is such a good question. When I was due in art college, I took all the classes. I would and I would also inspire people to take all the classes, because I knew that I loved art and I knew that I really liked the technical side of things, but I didn't necessarily know like how that would marry together. And so I just took a ton of classes, and which was such a really great experience because I got to use different mediums I would have never been exposed to if I didn't go to college. And I also got to just use different software and technologies that I didn't even know existed, which was really, really great. And it wasn't until my last year in college, and it was during one of the second to last critiques. And like in college, like if you have gone to art school, you only go to school, you only have to go to class on critique days. Everything else is like studio hours, so it's just like you making and doing and everything. But when it's like critique days, like when you actually bring your project in, like that's like literally the most important day of class. And I remember just my computer crashed and I lost a bunch of stuff that I was doing, and I just felt super uninspired. I really realized that I just really like stretched myself super thin, and I didn't go to critique, which I still cannot believe that I didn't do it. But I just remember my one of my friends, she was the classmate, told the teacher, was like, TahJah's not feeling well, and so she's not coming to critique. And the teacher was like, I was waiting for her to unravel. And I was like, so just the fact that like someone saw that I was like hustling and just doing everything and like, and just was like, this girl's about to crash. And I didn't even know. And like just having that feeling of being like, I cannot even like get out of bed or even have the courage to just show up and be like, hey, like everything I had on my computer crashed and like I need to extend my date. And just also like just knowing that like that was kind of like a wake up call for me of being like, I am doing too much. Like I really need to go back and figure out, like I don't need to like carpe diem every single second of my life. And I don't need to take every single class because I might never get to take that class. Like I was such a like, I just wanted to fulfill every second of my life and really not realize like your body needs rest so much that it will force you to rest in the most inconvenient time for you. It's going to be like the most important moment in your life where you're like, I have to 1,000% be there. And that is when your body's like, you know what, we're not showing up today. Like you need to chill, you need to stop. And so it's so important to build that in for yourself. So when you do have such a big event, like you can actually show up to it, because at the end of the day, your body is going to stop. Like it totally does.
Oh my gosh. What did you do after that as far as school went? Were you able to get an extension? And then did you just take a week off and just sleep the whole time to try to recover? What happened?
I I was able to get an extension, and my teacher was like, I'm just very fortunate. Of all the teachers that I had,
Oh,
it was this
good.
one that was just like it worked out fine, but it really was the beginning of things where I was just like, I remember my brother telling me, he made a comment, he was like, when you rest, when you have your downtime, he's like, you're watching YouTube videos on how to do photography or how to do
Yes.
art. And he was just like, that's not resting. And he was like, you're reading books on how to do the things that you're in school for all the time. He's like, that's not resting. And I was just like, well, then what's rest? And it was like that. I was like, what's the difference between watching like a reality show on TV or watching a YouTuber on every like second of like breaking down a camera and explaining every technical detail? Like, how is that not rest? And so that was really like the beginning of like me realizing that I didn't know what rest was.
Oh my God. So tell me about that line then. Where and how much education do you do versus what do you do to actually rest now? Because I'm interested. Because now I'm the same way. Like when I'm done in front of the computer and I'm hanging out with the family, like if they're just watching TV, I'm thinking I don't want to watch this, so I'll just watch tutorials on my iPad or something. So I'm really interested to hear what you do.
Yeah. So, and I feel like this looks different. Like, of course, this looks different for everyone. So it's kind of just figuring out like what works really well with for you. Um, at first, mine was the easiest thing was like getting into mindless television, which was actually really hard for me, because it was so hard for me that like I couldn't sit down and just watch TV.
Hmm.
If I sit down and watch TV, it's like I have to have food. I'm checking my phone. I'm like, I would start cleaning because I'm like I can't sit still. Like it's just
Yeah.
like humanly impossible for me to sit still. I hated going to the movies because I was like, I have to sit in this room for an hour and a half. Or it's like 2 hours. It's not even. It's like more than that now. And I'm just like, I need to talk. I need to do something. I need to like be out in the world. And so like I remember being like, I should be able to watch a 30-minute episode and not pick up my phone of something. Like I should be able to do that. And it was so hard to do. And once I kind of got to the point of just being like, of just kind of turning off my mind and being able to like actually watch an episode of something without like trying to do something else, that's kind of like when I realized like I was like, okay, like this is what it's like to have your mind turned off. And you can do, and so like that was something that kind of helped me with that. But then I realized like I really like plants. I like watering my plants and taking care of my plants. I got really into like making coffee. Like, I'm like one of those like Instagram people who was like, I grind my own beans and I like, have my little tea kettle. It was trying to take away the instant from my life. I think was like, I was like, I love coffee and I love when I get a good cup of coffee, like when they do the pour overs, like instead of me just like having a machine that does it for me, like maybe I can actually learn how to make it myself and kind of like slow down and let that be like a way that I don't have like this instant gratification. I actually work a little bit for it.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Try to take away the instant. Take away the instant. That's a fantastic way to just kind of summarize this whole episode. Essentially, everything that we're talking about here. You're absolutely right. Taking away that instant. I'm gonna let that marinate for a while. That's good. That's really good. When it comes to coffee, do you have a favorite kind of coffee?
I love just black coffee.
Hmm.
Especially I'm really big into the French pressing my coffee. I try to like get really into the pour over because it's like it's beautiful and that's usually what everyone likes, but I love just black French pressed coffee. It's my favorite.
That's. Do you have a favorite like blend of coffee? I guess like light roast, dark roast. As somebody who's like really into coffee, what do you prefer?
I gravitate more towards light roasted coffee, especially since I French press because it's like it makes it just stronger and like also you don't have as much as that like it has just like more flavor profile to it. So I gravitate more towards the lighter roast. And there's actually this really cute coffee shop that's like right across the street from me, and they make their own beans, and it's called French Truck. They're in New Orleans and in Baton Rouge, and I love their coffee. That's usually the brand that I get.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. I love, you know what I love? There was, I forget what the show was, but there was this show that I watched a long time ago that just kind of profiled um, artisans, I suppose, but it was over everything. And I didn't know this was a thing, but in Japan, there's this chef, and he raises his own chickens. And because it's not a farm raised chicken, because it's not pumped full of antibiotics, he's like, you can serve it like medium rare if you want to, which I had never heard of before. I didn't even know that this was a thing. I thought that all white meat, pork, chicken had to be served at like 190 degrees or whatever it is. But he has figured out a way. Like, he has spent his entire life focused on these chickens, and he knows everything about chickens. And when you talk to him, you could just sense that this man is a professional. Like, for something that most people just totally take for granted, he finds this one very small thing and he just dives deep into it. And I find that really inspiring. And I'm totally oblivious to the whole coffee world, so I kind of feel that same way. Like, oh, tell me more about coffee. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. I never would have guessed that a lighter roast would have been more flavorful and have more uh, uh, well, flavor. I was gonna say flavor again with the pour over. So that's cool. I've never even tried a pour over, so I'm gonna have to try that.
You should. You should.
Now I got a whole bunch of things that I have to do after this episode. Oh.
I'm giving you a whole. I'm like talking like rest, don't hustle, and I'm like, but
Yeah.
also here's a whole list of things you should do after this episode.
That is perfect. That is hilarious. You mentioned, I want to get back to it. You mentioned talking about, being able to watch a full episode of something without being on our phones. And I'm right there with you. But at the same time, our phones are very powerful tools. We use them for more than just endless, mindlessly browsing. So are there any sort of apps or programs that you use on your phone that helps you fulfill your creative health bucket?
I am not necessarily going to give you an app, but I'm going to tell you when it comes to notifications is to turn them off. That has been, unless I like actually sign into Gmail, like I don't have like Gmail on my phone. Like email and my phone like do not go hand in hand. Like I have to be at my desk on my computer in order to respond to emails. I have time that I set that for. I don't have any kind of notifications on my Instagram or Facebook, like anything like that. I just don't have my notifications turned on, because you really should try to get to the point where you're blocking off the time for that. And like right now we're recording this episode during quarantine, so it's like I don't even need the notifications because I'm on the apps. I have no time that I'm doing anything. I am just on them. But if I could tell you anything to do like with your phone is to get as many of the notifications off as possible. I think the only time I'm really alerted is for text messages, but I don't let my clients text message me. So I know that's usually from like friends and family.
Mm-hmm. Have you found that there's been any sort of so there's obviously you've heard of like FOMO, fear of missing out. Have you ever experienced any real ramifications of turning off notifications on your phone, or has it all just been everything's been fine? Is this something that we just create in our head?
I had more of I wasn't experiencing FOMO. I was experiencing a lot of resentment for something that was totally my fault. Like I can remember like spending time with my family, and I was like, just being with them. I have this little brother who's like 20 years younger than me, and so I was just like spending time with him and having this moment, and I just get this email, like this email from a client who just wanted something, and it's in her email, it just sounded so urgent, and it could have been how I read the text message. Also, at the end of the day, she doesn't know that I'm with her, but I was just like, why would you send this to me on a weekend that I'm doing something on the like it's so late, like, but that's when she had her free time, because she's not, you know what I mean? So I was just kind of like, that's when the moment that I realized, like, I was like, this is not healthy. Like, this is not something that I need to be doing. And at the end of the day, like, I can't get to this now because I am with my family. I'm not in front of computer, I can't respond to this. So when I realized that when I did get to my computer, because when I did get to my computer and I actually like sent her the email, everything was fine. Like I made it a bigger deal than like what it was, but
Yeah.
it was because I was able to read it and to see it, and that really just like takes you out of a moment. It really like it's like almost like a punch, and it's just like it really just like take so much out. And so I kind of realized like I need to set these boundaries to like maintain a healthy relationship, because like what if I responded to her and I was just like, how dare you send an email to me at 8 o'clock at night? And I said, it makes me sound like I'm being so like sassy to my clients. I'm totally not. I'm like, but it's like it realized to me that like I needed to set those boundaries so that I can show up the best way that I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Set boundaries and take away the instant. This is
Yeah.
great. This is
Yeah.
great. Oh my gosh. Is there anything? This will be my last question for you. I know that we're running out of time. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, or that you haven't said, that you want to make sure that maybe those who are starting to potentially experience burnout understand about their own creative pursuits?
Yes. So, I really, because I know that that your podcast is for beginner photographers, and I want to really just show that that is so true. This hustle mindset is what you need in the beginning to be successful. Like if you are working in the day, like you stay up all night on your website and responding to clients and handling things and putting yourself out there and hustling as hard as you can. Like that is a part of the process of doing it. But then you get to the point where you have to kind of create a stride. Hustling is not sustainable. It really isn't. At the end of the day, like you, when you get to like where you are, like you can't keep that up for 5 years. It's like
Yeah.
kind of like with kids have so much energy and they can play, and the older that they get, the more that they realize like I am not running all the time. It's like that thing. It's like you become older, you become wiser, and just when you start out with that hustle and that grind, really kind of start paying attention like when you're getting more clients. Like okay, I'm getting more clients, so it's like I can't be there every second of the day. I might need to start incorporating business hours. I might need to start like just start auditing yourself and start thinking about things in that way. And one of the things with the people who I interview in my podcast, they talk so much about like walking in the middle of the day. So far, everyone that I have interviewed, they all just talk about like if they can just like they work and they work very hard in this like from this time to this time, but then in the middle of the day they'll go and like walk their dog or just like jog around or just like go explore outside a little bit, and then they come back with like a fresh set of eyes to like, and they realize that they can solve a problem so much quicker. That has also just kind of been like an overarching thing that I've noticed from people who have experienced burned out, and they try to prevent it by just like taking a break from their work in the middle of the day, because it's so easy once you start to not stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, I mean, just kind of separating yourself from whatever it is that you're working on just for a few minutes really does help. Really does help.
Yes.
Well, TahJah, I have to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. For all the listeners who want to find out more about you or follow you online, can you let them know how to get in touch?
Yes, so you can find me definitely on Instagram. That's usually where I'm the most up to date. And it is at TahJah Harmony, and it's TahJah like the Taj Mahal. So it's TahJahHarmony, which I'm sure you'll have linked somewhere.
Oh, it's all going to be in the show notes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anywhere else you want to share about the podcast?
Yes. And so I also have a podcast called the Creative Health Podcast. We did our first season like a year ago, and I had to creatively, for my health, take a little break from it. But we are starting it back up again, which I'm hoping we will start this up within like the next couple of weeks. I should have a next episode out. And yeah, that's basically where I interview people who have been in their business for at least 5 years and have experienced burnout. And we just kind of like share our journey and our story through that.
Ah, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. I'm excited for season 2. It's going to be great. So again, TahJah, thank you so much for everything that you shared today, and I look forward to following you in the future and keeping up.
Thank you so much for having me. That was so much fun.
I don't know about you, but I am feeling better already. TahJah just has this really upbeat and positive outlook on the world. It really makes you just kind of forget the troubles that you were feeling before, and she focuses on kind of what to do next, which is a really just interesting way to, or not interesting, really compelling way to listen to this interview. So I actually moved this interview up, I guess 2 weeks to release it now, as I think that it is just kind of so important. Creative health is really something that, well, for creatives like us, if you don't have it, you kind of feel a bit empty. And with the current state of the world, with, the pandemic, the amount of injustice and the amount of division that we all feel, I'll be honest, social media has just been a real bummer to me and has done more harm for my happiness in the past, I don't know, I guess month or so, but exponentially in the last week or two, that I just can't do it. I just cannot do it. I try with all of my might to stay off of Facebook. And when I do, I'll be honest, I just feel much better about myself and how I feel. And that really all comes down to this creative bucket, which we talked about. So, I kind of just want to let you know that if you're feeling down or outraged or even numb, it might be that. And that it is okay to take a break from what is draining you. Now, my biggest takeaway from this episode was just simply TahJah's phrase, take away the instant. This is something that I wish that somebody had told me from the beginning. It is very much I'm very much a now kind of person. And my personality is that I hate working on a task that I can't complete in a single day. As when I do something, I want to do it and I want to finish it now. But as time has gone, I've seen the power that you can have when you take away the instant. And honestly, that power, it's all mental. It almost frees up your brain a bit to think about things, I don't know, I guess a little deeper rather than trying to think about things faster. And I think about this quote from Benjamin Franklin, which was, now I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was, if I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes figuring out exactly what that problem was, and then the last 5 minutes solving that problem. Meaning that, when you try to get in there fast and try to solve something real quick, maybe you're missing the real problem there. So anyway, I would love for you to share your biggest takeaway in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. What was the one thing that resonated with you from TahJah's interview the most? So if you're not already a part of it already, you can join the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group by searching Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast. Go figure. So anyway, that is it for this week. Until next week, I really want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more. And I want you to make do with the gear that you got, because I promise you, it is better than you think. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.